Hey, welcome back to the channel. So my cat hasn't made a guest appearance for several videos, so there's a bag of snacks behind me to lure her. I don't know, in the past I didn't have to bribe her like that. She would just jump up, but this is what's required now. Anyways, what are we learning in this video? Well, this is a topic I've actually never taught before. We're gonna be talking about user-uploaded images. Well, we did just cover this in the very last video on this channel, but we didn't learn how to push that local app up onto the web, to share it with the whole world. The reason I've never covered that aspect is because there's usually not really a free way of doing that, right? So services with free tiers like Netlify, Vercel, GitHub Pages, they don't really have a robust way of letting users upload images. And the free tier of Heroku, there's no way to let a user upload an image, right? Because the file system is temporary. So the obvious solution that some of you might be yelling at the screen right now is AWS. AWS, just use an S3 bucket. But that would require you to have a credit card on file, and S3 is only free for the first year. So for an educational video, that's not really something I'm going to endorse. There is one service, though, that's sort of an exception to all of this, and that's something called Cloudinary. Now, I'm not affiliated with Cloudinary in any way. I just think it's a pretty useful service with a generous free tier. You don't even need to have a credit card on file, and the monthly limits for a free account are pretty spacious. So Cloudinary is this service where you can have users upload images. They have their own documentation, so for a lot of basic things, you can just check the documentation. You wouldn't need a YouTube video like this, but there's one case in particular that I want to explain, and that is where you have your app and you want to give permission to certain authenticated users to upload images to Cloudinary, right? And you don't want to waste your own server's bandwidth, so you don't want to have them first upload the image to your server and then have your server send it to Cloudinary. That would be a waste, right? So you want your client-side JavaScript to just let your users upload the image directly to Cloudinary servers. Now, that might sound really easy to do, but the question is, how can our server trust the client-side JavaScript return value? In other words, if you've never really worked with an API and generating signatures and verifying signatures, it can get really confusing really quickly. And so I want to walk you through my reference code. So we're not going to write code together in this video. We're just going to look at my reference GitHub code, but I'm going to walk through things with you step by step so that the process actually makes sense. So big picture, this is a completely free way for you to add user uploaded images to your projects. Without further ado, let's jump into the action. Okay, so it all starts with this reference repo that I've set up. If you want to follow along, you can download the code or clone it. You can find a link to this repo in the description for this video, but right now let me give you an overview of the reference code. So here I have that repo folder in VS Code. With it open, you can just run an npm install. Cool. And now before we actually start up the task or the application, let's first make sure we have a Cloudinary account. So in your browser, you can just visit cloudinary.com if you don't already have a Cloudinary account. They have a fairly generous free tier, and you don't even need to have a credit card on file. So if you're at all interested in learning how to set something like this up, I'd encourage you to sign up for a free account. When you log in for the first time, it'll ask you what's your role. I just chose developer. And then I think for the next question, it asked me what I'm trying to achieve. I just chose, building an app or integrating with an app. Anyways, once you are logged into your Cloudinary account, from the top left menu, click on this dashboard link. Okay, and now these are the three values we're interested in: cloud name, API key, and API secret. Now these first two, cloud name and API key, you can include these on the front end of your website, so you're not leaking anything that shouldn't be leaked. However, do not let anyone that's not directly on your development team ever know what your API secret value is. Anyways, from this screen, you can see that you could use this icon here to copy any one of these three values into your clipboard. Cool. So now back in VS Code, you can do this with me. Jump into the .env file and just fill in these three values, right? So cloud name would be first. So for example, here's my cloud name. I would just copy that. And right here, just equals. You don't even need quotes or anything around it. Just, cloud name equals your value. Do the same thing for your API key and your API secret. I'm going to do it off camera so I don't leak my API secret, but just go ahead and save this file when you're done. Cool. Now there's just one more file where you need to enter your API key. So in the public folder, go into clientside.js. And up at the top here, you'll see those two values again, API key and cloud name. So that first file we edited, that was for our server side, our Express code. This is for our client side JavaScript. And again, you're not leaking anything that you shouldn't be leaking. Cloudinary fully expects these values to be available to the public. So I'll just fill those in really quick. So my API key, that's this value here. So that goes in these quotes. And then my cloud name, that's this value. That would go in these quotes. Cool. Go ahead and save this file. And now we're ready to take this app for a test drive. So let me upload a photo or two. And then once we see that it works, I'll actually explain step by step what the code is doing. And most importantly, how our server can trust the front end. So in the command line, you can just run npm run dev. Go ahead and press enter. And then in the browser, in a new tab, just visit localhost:3000. I've added a super simple username and password check just to illustrate the point that we're not just wanting any random visitor to be able to upload. We're practicing a situation where we've already authenticated a user in our application, right? On our server side, whether that's Express or serverless or whatever. We've already established that we trust this user and we only want to give that user permission to upload. So that's what I'm simulating here with this fake login. So the username is admin and the password is admin. So go ahead and log in. So the idea is that user is now authenticated. We want them to have permission to upload directly to Cloudinary. So let's just upload maybe 2 or 3 photos. Before we actually fill out the form, go ahead and open up your console. Okay, now let me upload maybe 2 photos. So I'll choose a file. I'll go with this dog. This is 3 megabytes. So I'll click upload here. In the console, you'll notice it's updating like every half second with the progress. So when it's 0.5, that means it's halfway uploaded. When it's 1, that means it's completely uploaded. And then when it finishes, we get this response object from Cloudinary. So in this response from Cloudinary, what we're really interested in is this public ID value. So just this string of characters, this is what uniquely identifies the photo that's stored on Cloudinary's servers. So you could use this value to predict the URL where you could access that photo. In other words, this is the value that our server is probably interested in, right? Our server would probably want to store this value in a database or use it in some fashion. So let me upload 1 or 2 more photos and then I'll explain what I mean. So choose another photo, maybe this cat here. Go ahead and click upload. Cool, so it's working, it's uploading, it finishes. Cloudinary sends us back this response. There is a different public ID value. Now check this out. Typically you might want to store that in a database or who knows, but to keep this example simple, I've set up our Express server to just store those values in this data.txt file. So you can open that up. There you see the 2 public ID values for the photos I just uploaded. Now check this out. Back in the browser, you could click this link. How would I use the public ID values that I stored in my database, or in our case, just a TXT file? Click that, and it's going to generate this page, and it's using those 2 public ID values to generate a URL, and that URL will access the photo from Cloudinary servers, right? So you could right-click on this image, choose open a new tab to look at the URL, right? So it's res.cloudinary.com. And then, towards the very end of the URL, there is that public ID value for that photo. Cool. You could also go back into your Cloudinary and click on Media Library, right? And there are those 2 photos. They're living on Cloudinary servers. So all we need to store on our end is just their public ID values. And then we can programmatically create these photo URLs. Now, the real question here is, how in the world is our Express server trusting the client-side JavaScript response that it gets back from Cloudinary, right? Because a malicious user could tell the client-side JavaScript to return any value. Let me walk through it one more time if that doesn't make sense, right? So if I upload a third photo and click upload, right? So we're in the console, this is just client-side JavaScript. Cloudinary sends our front end this object back, yes. This is the value that our back end would be interested in, but how does our back end know that this client-side JavaScript isn't going to return a fake malicious value here, right? That's really the heart of this whole matter. So at this point, we've seen a working example. Now it's time to jump into client-side JavaScript in the public folder. And let me just walk through this file with you so that the big picture process here of establishing trust can be explained and understood. Okay, so first of all, we're just selecting the HTML form on the page. We're saying that when it gets submitted, prevent the default behavior, and then we're going to spell out what should happen. So first of all, before we can actually send the photo to Cloudinary servers, we need to first get permission. So we're sending a request to our own server, the URL of, just get signature. And the signature is what's going to allow Cloudinary to trust this front-end user. So to make sense of this, we can just go look at the server-side route for get signature. So in the root of the folder, server.js, if you scroll down to about line number 55 here, we see the get route for get signature. Now remember, this server.js file has access to our API secret. I won't bore you with it, but if you looked up at the top of this file, you would see that it was accessing those values from our .env file. So essentially, we're saying that a user we've already authenticated, when they visit this get signature URL, we're going to give them a signature, and Cloudinary works in a way where it's going to be good for the next hour. So if you didn't want the signature to be valid for a full hour, you could just subtract time from this timestamp value. So this is measured in seconds. So if you only wanted it to be valid for half an hour, you would just subtract 30 minutes worth of seconds from this number. Also, this would be your place server side to perform any other checks. So maybe every time a user uploads a photo, you could tag it in Cloudinary with, their unique user ID. And then in the future, before you give them another signature, you could check to make sure that, they've only uploaded 10 photographs today. Otherwise, you don't give them a new signature. In this simple example, I'm not performing any checks. I'm just giving them a signature, right? And the idea is that you need your API secret in order to create a signature. So then I'm just responding back to the client-side JavaScript with timestamp and signature values. The key here, though, is that there's no way to fake a signature if you don't have the API secret. Cool. So back in our client side, right, the client-side JavaScript is going to have those values in this signature response. So now it's a matter of just actually sending the photo to Cloudinary servers. That's what's going on down here around line number 18 of the client-side JavaScript, right? We're sending a post request to Cloudinary. And the only things that are truly required to send along to them are the timestamp and signature, but also your API key and obviously the file that you're trying to upload. Cool. Anyways, the signature is what lets Cloudinary trust this front-end request. And then once we get our response back from Axios, right, Cloudinary response, that's what's going to have the public ID. Well, a bunch of other things, right? You can look in the console. The object that Cloudinary gives the front end contains all sorts of information. The idea is that we want to send some of that data back to our back end. So then the final step down here, I'm just having an Axios post request to our Express server. So I made up a route of, do something with photo. The idea is that our server probably wants to do something useful with the public ID for the new photo. So how in the world does Express actually trust this value? Let's talk about that. So when we pass along the request to our server, we're not just giving it the public ID, we're also giving it the version and, most importantly, the signature. So these are three things that Cloudinary gives back to our front end, we need to pass all three of these things to our server so that our server can do its job and actually trust this. So the final step of making sense of this is to go back into our server.js file, and let's find the route for, do something with photo. So you can see the first thing I'm doing is I'm creating a variable. I'm just making up a name and I'm calling it expected signature. And the Cloudinary package has a method called, API sign request. And the idea here is we're just seeing what the signature should be based on our API secret and what the visitor is claiming the public ID and version values to be, right? Because a malicious user could send over totally fake values for the public ID and the version. However, the malicious user has no idea what our API secret is. So if we can take the value that the user is claiming these to be and combine that with our secret and generate what the signature should be, we can then compare that. We can say, okay, only if what we expect the signature to be, only if it actually equals what the front end is sending back to us, only if that's true can we actually trust the incoming data. If it is true, then this is where you could either save that public ID into your database or just do whatever you need to do with it. To keep this example simple, I didn't save it into a database. I'm just saving it into a text file. But that's the big picture process of how you could actually trust the incoming value. And that's really it. So beyond that, a really cool feature of Cloudinary is how easy it is to create alternate versions of images on the fly. So if we visit this link, right, how would I use the public ID values? You can see the images are quite small, but if you just go into server.js and around line number 82, I have this route called view photos. It's just a little bit of HTML, right? Here's a list item for each image in our text file, the IDs. In the URL that's being used for each image, you can change these values. So instead of a width of 200, you could set this to like 600, a height of 300, quality, instead of 100, you could say 70 or 60 for a smaller file size. But you can change all of these on the fly. Cloudinary will see this URL and create the appropriate image on the fly. So we can save that. And if I refresh this page, Cloudinary regenerates different copies of the images for us. So Cloudinary keeps the original high resolution copy, and then it's that easy to create alternate versions, right? And all we needed to keep on our end in the database is just those public ID values. And that's it. For a really quick example, I did also include, a delete feature. So for example, if I wanted to delete the image of the cat, I can click this delete button. And then you can go into Cloudinary and refresh your collection just to prove the point. And you can see that cat photo is gone. So all I did there, if you go into server.js, I have a route down here. If you send a post request to delete photo with the ID of what you're trying to delete, this code doesn't matter. This is just simulating, removing it from your database. What really matters is this line. You just say Cloudinary upload or destroy the public ID that you want to delete, and it will delete it from your Cloudinary account. And that's it. That's going to bring this lesson to a close. I think this is a great way to have user submitted, uploaded images for free in your projects. I think Cloudinary combined with the free tier of an online MongoDB Atlas account, combined with either Netlify or Vercel cloud functions or the Heroku free account, you could have some really useful apps and host them online without spending a single penny. If you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy my premium courses over on Udemy. So in the description for this video, you can find a link to this page. This page has heavily discounted coupons for all of my courses. This course in particular is about JavaScript, both server-side and client-side. In the course, we build a simple social network app together. With user registration, we validate all the data. One user can follow another user and build a homepage feed. In this course, we learn all about React.js. This course, we learn the basics of working with a MySQL database, so on and so forth. Anyways, thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope you feel like you learned something, and stay tuned for more web development tutorials.